We already discussed the anatomy of the digestive tract and the pieces and parts. Now we're going to talk about the process of digestion and what happens in the areas of the digestive tract. So as we said previously, digestion makes all the foods that we eat and divides them into the basic units of carbohydrate, which is sugar, fat, which are triglycerides and fatty acids essentially, and protein, which are amino acids. And there are different organs involved in this process. These organs secrete digestive juices, and they include the salivary glands, the stomach, the small intestine, the liver via the gallbladder, and the pancreas. Enzymes are essential to digestion. They are made up of protein and they are catalysts. And a catalyst is a compound that facilitates chemical reactions without itself being changed in the process. So an enzyme essentially speeds up digestion and is not changed as it is doing that. It is then, in many cases, available to be used again to continue the digestive process. First, in the mouth, the salivary glands, which are exocrine glands, secrete saliva into the mouth, and saliva itself contains water, salt, and enzymes. The water, as we mentioned previously, mixes with the food and allows it to somewhat liquefy, and the enzymes start to break down the food into smaller pieces. Salivary amylase is an enzyme that splits amylose into its smallest components, into a smaller component. It starts to break down starch into sugar. Gastric glands are exocrine glands in the stomach wall that secrete gastric juice into the stomach. The gastric juices that are released into the stomach are essentially enzyme and acid. You may remember hearing that the stomach is very acidic. In fact, the stomach has an acidity of around 2, which is a very strong acid. So, in the gastric juices, as we said, it contains hydrochloric acid and enzymes. These enzymes, the enzyme is essentially pepsin, which works on breaking apart protein, and the hydrochloric acid also helps to unravel or denature the protein. In the intestine, there are additional juices that enter the small intestine itself, and these are responsible for digesting carbohydrate and protein and fat. A large amount of enzymes come in from the pancreas. This is called pancreatic juice, and these contain more enzymes which digest carbohydrate, fat, and protein. The pancreas has an additional function as part of the endocrine system. It also secretes insulin and glucagon, which we'll talk about later. Bicarbonate is part of the pancreatic juice, and bicarbonate is essentially an alkaline substance which starts to neutralize or neutralizes the chyme that was very acidic that came in from the stomach. Finally, another substance that is very important for digestion is bile. Bile is not an acid or an enzyme. It prepares fats and oils for digestion. It's made in the liver, stored in the gallbladder, and released into the small intestine bit by bit as needed. It works as an emulsifier that allows fat and water to mix. Fat arises in the small intestine lying on top of the stomach contents because, as you know, water and oil do not mix. Bile allows that fat to mix in with the rest of the contents so that the enzymes can start to work on digesting the fat. This is what it looks like, the emulsification of fat by bile. As you can see in the first picture, the fat is floating on top of the watery digestive juices. Bile has an affinity for both fat and water, so bile can mix the fat into the water. The emulsified fat is in little tiny droplets, if you will, and this allows these little droplets of fat to be more easily exposed to the enzymes to allow fat digestion to complete efficiently. I like to think about it like adding dishwashing liquid to your sink full of greasy dishes. If you tried to wash greasy dishes with just water, the grease would not come off the dishes. But the detergent in the soap itself is like bile. Bile acts as a detergent in a way to break up the fat into little globules to make it more easy to clean your dishes. In the same way, bile breaks up the fat in your digestive system into little globules to make it easier for the enzymes to mix with the fat. The rate of digestion depends on the contents of the meal. A meal that is really high in simple sugar or simple carbohydrate digests very quickly. That's because it's relatively easy to digest simple sugars and carbohydrates because there's not much breaking apart to do. If the meal is rich in fat, however, you can start to understand how a lot more is going on with the emulsification of fat and the enzymes needing to mix with it. So therefore, a meal that is rich in fat is slower to digest. Perhaps you'll recall that if you have a very high fat meal, you do feel fuller longer. The same thing goes for if your meal has protein in it. Protein slows digestion as well and makes you feel fuller longer. Think about if you just grab a banana for breakfast, you're hungry pretty quickly. But if you grab banana and eggs and maybe some bacon and some toast, it's not just the size of the meal that makes you feel fuller longer, it's the contents of the meal. As we said before, the energy-yielding nutrients of carbohydrate, fat, and protein are disassembled to basic building blocks before they are absorbed. The other nutrients, vitamins, minerals, and water, are absorbed as they are. Undigested things like fiber are not absorbed at all, but continue through the digestive tract as a semi-solid mass. Fiber is actually beneficial to the digestive tract because it keeps the muscles strong. Fiber also attracts water to itself, which makes the wastes softer and easier to pass. So if you have fiber-rich meals, it helps to work the muscles of your digestive tract and helps to make the waste softer. It helps to prevent constipation. When food or waste arrives in the small intestine, there is little or no value left to it because the body has extracted all of the basic nutrients that it needs from the food. All that is left is some water that may be reabsorbed and a few salts. But again, fiber is really beneficial to the gut. So let's have a knowledge check here. Which nutrient passes through the large intestine mostly unabsorbed? Is it starch, minerals, fiber, or vitamins? The answer here is fiber. Fiber passes through the large intestine mostly unabsorbed. It stimulates the digestive tract's muscles and retains water, keeping the stool soft. This makes it easier to pass, and also this makes it glob on to bile acids and sterols and take some fat out of the body. We'll see later that this is really good for our body's cholesterol levels.